Hello again, my friends, and welcome back to 15-Minute Free Thinking. I'll be your host, Carpo, as usual. Hopefully not for long. I'd like to have a co-host. I just can't find anyone to do it. So, for now, it's just me and my opinions on things. And I'd like to talk about false prophets today. It's something that I've mentioned before, and I've probably discussed several times in the past. I've always been of the mind of protecting the consumer and the individual from people making false claims, but also realize that part of that is to realize that caveat emptor, or buyer beware, is very important to remember when you're talking about people getting ripped off. Buyer beware is important. If you make a bad deal, if you sign a bad contract, you still signed it. You still made that deal. This is honestly why the issues come up with, say, student loan forgiveness, because people signed an agreement to pay a loan. And so the point being here, because that's political in itself, but it's a great example because there's two things that we're not supposed to talk about. I was always told growing up. One, politics. The next one, religion. Those were the obvious ones. Of course, this has morphed into including many more factors. Now you don't talk about not just politics, but your ideologies, your ideas. You don't talk about even science. Oh, I don't trust science. Oh, I do trust science. In the middle is everybody who are what they call the, displaced multitudes. There's a proper term for it, but when people talk about this left and right division, say politically in the U.S., it's not that cut and dry. A very small percentage, of people are actually highly associated with being left or right. For the majority of us, more people than either party is, the people who just feel displaced, left out to dry. And we just try to see things as they are, rather than attaching to an ideology. And this is important for where this video is going here, or audio if you're listening to the podcast. When people make a choice in their lives to take a position on a topic, they still should remain open to the idea that they might be wrong. In my personal life, I have found a lot of the ideologies that I once completely agreed with, things like socialism or being anti-religion or anti-political altogether, have completely changed. I've thought these things through, and being almost 47 now, I've had plenty of time to process this, and as a self-proclaimed philosopher that I read and I think, and I'm always thinking about ideas, I've trained my brain to always be processing things, not in a way that supports my view, but in a way that challenges it. That's why I do play the devil's advocate sometimes. A lot of folks say that that's pointless, but it's very beneficial for me. I'll argue against my own ideas because I want to know if I'm not right or wrong. But if what I'm believing and what I say harms anyone, that's something I would never want to happen. So when I see these televangelists, which was the perfect example to start with, who are up there standing on stage with their microphone, screaming to the audience that they can heal them, and what goes on behind the scenes at these things? I mean, when I was a kid, it was Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, two of the most fake and ridiculous people you've ever seen in your life, yet people flocked to see them because they claimed to be prophets with a connection to God. In the Bible itself, I believe, says that false prophets are pretty easy to identify by the fact that they make a prophecy and it's false. And today, we have people making all kinds of projections and predictions. But here's the thing, the church is no longer talking about predictions for Jesus returning or God. It's things about Trump, this obsession with politics. It's become so absurd that looking at it from the outside as a non-political, non-religious person, it's playground fodder. it's absolutely ridiculous. I can't believe in my mind that people fall for this shit. But that leaves open a question as to why. And so instead of just pointing the finger and saying, oh, these people believe this and these people believe that, they're idiots, I want to know why. I don't believe people are idiots. I think people want hope. And this is where faith comes into the discussion. You know, I even just today, I've been processing the history of religion and trying to... I kind of had this epiphany about why religion was pressed on the people, even when the people who pressed it didn't necessarily believe it themselves. Because they realized, you know, over thousands of years, we've acknowledged over and over and over again that people need something to look forward to. They need some kind of hope and purpose, and they need a set of morals and boundaries. Not everyone. A lot of people think that they've created their own reality and their own boundaries, and, oh, I don't need anybody else to tell me my morals. But we're all influenced by our environment, and not one of us can escape that. You cannot get away from what you've been programmed to understand. You can learn to believe new things, and you can gain new ideas, but you really are a product of your environment. The only exception to that is our instinct and intuition, which sits far outside of anything that we've been taught. And my intuition tells me that people who are asking for money to save you from, you know, hell or damnation, or folks who, this prosperity gospel is what they call it, or planting the seed. Even 30 years ago, I would troll these, you know, evangelists who would send me mail. This one guy, it was send you a penny, and they would say, you know, send back 2 pennies, and it will help to, you know, something for God, right? It's going to help to save your soul. It goes on and on. This is a very well-known organization. I don't even know if they still do it, but in the end, I got them to send me $1, and then they wanted me to send $20 back or something. I never did. I just said, no, my intention is to get $1 out of these people and walk away. And it was, you know, but I kept all the literature they sent, and it was like, basically, hey, you're going to be damned to hell for eternity unless you do this, and then you'll be happy. It's pretty simple that people will use the fear of hell and damnation to scare you into believing what they believe and paying them. The same way that the court system, on a completely different aspect, will convince you to take a plea bargain out of fear that something worse might happen, even though they know they're in the wrong, and end up screwing you over worse and charging you a bunch of money to be on probation. It's the political aspect of this it permeates all aspects of life. Now, I'm not sure where to go because this is an off-the-cuff podcast. I really wanted to mention that, you know, when I talk about religion, I'm not just harping on ancient religions. I have more respect for them than far more respect than I ever did in the past, and far more respect for them than I ever would for something like Scientology. And I think Scientology, and even to a lesser degree Mormonism, has really solidified my belief that religion is a construct that people will believe anything. Mormonism is the exception only because the difference between Scientology and Mormonism is Scientology encourages you to abandon family, whereas Mormonism is much more family-oriented. But even then, both want to excommunicate anyone who doesn't believe what they believe and think what they think. The fact that any belief system in the world would encourage you to leave family if they didn't believe what you believe shows just how shallow not just the organization is, but the people who believe it. The Sea Org, which is like the elite group of members in Scientology, and I've done a lot of research on this, but I've never really talked about it because it's pointless. I think Leah Remini did, she exposed that. Plenty of idiot celebrities going in and joining Scientology because people are so desperate to have truth and understand the world that they will do anything. The fact that otherwise intelligent people believe dumb things is not something to harp on each other about. It's okay. We're all dumb in that way. We all want to believe something. It's you know, the kinds of things that people believe extend far outside of course, religion, into politics. And in politics, like I said, it's just as bad, even worse, because we believe that this whole other side is the evil ones. And I believe it's a projection, kind of a way for us to have an enemy, create a demon, create a monster, when maybe we're secularists. I've heard people warn others of, you know, losing your religion or losing your faith. And that's what this, you know, podcast comes down to, is faith. What do you have faith in, and what do you believe? I have faith that there is something greater than us. I have faith that there is a consciousness in the universe which underwrites and permeates every aspect, that we can't understand, we will never understand, that we can catch glimpses of the tentacles, perhaps, but never the whole, because we're not meant to. I also believe that we, you know, have a purpose in a place that we can't comprehend, but I also believe that eventually this consciousness that we have now fades, like everything does, and that you can't live forever. There's no eternity. There's no long heaven that you live in for eternity happily, because happiness comes with drawbacks and problems that we have in life. You don't just live happily. You live happily because you've suffered. And that's why even the wealthiest people on earth are depressed a lot of the time. Because life is about your achievements as an individual and how well you play the game. Not to win, not to make more money, but to exist. So when you see preachers up there getting millions of dollars, people like Kenneth Copeland flying private jets and screaming about how God entitled him to it, you see that even the most trustworthy people, according to others, are completely full of shit. Whether they believe what they're saying or they don't, it doesn't matter. People are delusional, and they will convince you to believe what they believe. And it's the way I see politics and religion is like the same way as addicts. If you quit using and you have a group of friends that still uses dope, then they're going to try to bring you back in. They're not going to support you for quitting. They're going to try to drag you down. Everybody wants you to be an addict with them, so they're not suffering alone. But when it comes to desperation, like, I understand if people are looking to make an extra buck and they lose their money on the stock market. This is quite different when an old lady sends her last check, Social Security check, to a pastor or some evangelist claiming that he's going to multiply her money and loses her life savings hoping to get into heaven. People who prey on desperation are the lowest of the low. And even as a secularist or / atheist myself, I would never harm another human being willingly. I would never rob or rip off another human being. I would feel horrible to do so. I don't want anybody to be harmed or beaten, and I don't need a book to tell me that. But I also don't need politicians to tell me that. And that's why politics and religion, being so entwined with each other, have been utilized against the people for so long, as a way to say, don't talk about these things. Why? Not because you'll get into an argument with your fellow man, but because people don't want you questioning the status quo. As ridiculous as that may sound, people want to believe what they believe and say, hey, no. But the internet has completely changed that. And now we have to rethink everything we thought was true. We have to rethink how we interact with one another. I feel like we're just on the precipice of something great, being able to actually see things as they are to the best of our ability, which means we realize we really can't see it all. That we don't know if there's a heaven. We don't know if there's a hell. We don't know if anything outside of this reality exists, or if there's multiple dimensions, or how deep space is. You know, these things are questions way beyond us. What we should be asking is, how do I better become a friend and a better parent or family member or son or daughter, whoever it might be? Just be a better person and be happier in life. But we're always looking outside of ourselves for truth. And that's why we look to other individuals, and maybe that's why I make it a point not to. I like to listen to ideas, but I don't take anybody's ideas verbatim or as they would say, no pun intended, as gospel. So thanks for listening. Podcast version is available on all podcast platforms. If you'd rather hear that quality audio version, and you can download it for free. Or if you're watching the YouTube version, hi, and thanks for watching. If you're on YouTube, you can hit the thanks button down below if you want to contribute, or you can join me at my Patreon, whether you're listening or watching, Carpo719 on Patreon. And I appreciate all of you, and I will talk to you next time. And, on a final note, I guess the intention of making this was to get a few things off my chest, mostly about false prophets and evangelists, because they're the most obvious ones. But I want to make it clear that these people are everywhere. They're in every government office. They're in the science journals. They're in the hallways of your school. People who want to control others and tell them what to believe, but to make a profit. So, false prophets make the profits. I'll talk to y'all next time. Thanks for listening. Be well.